Kaimere is a distant planet. It is defined by waves of life brought from Earth and set free to evolve independently in this new context. The indigenous life of the planet, swarms of microbes called magic by the people who live there, are what harvest Earth organisms and make copies on Kaimere. As the asteroid which concluded the Mesozoic never struck Kaimere, dinosaurs remain the dominant terrestrial megafauna. Last week on Tales of Kaimere, we learned the history of Kaimeran proboscidians, or elephants and kin, and you learned about the ancestors of the many species known to the assembly we will meet today. As its name implies, the common or forest oliphant, often just called oliphant, is the most abundant proboscidian in the known world. They are proficient swimmers and are found in many wetland habitats, though dense forests are their preferred habitat. In this biome, which encompasses hundreds of islands throughout the inland sea and many coastal habitats, they live in small herds. Bulls are often solitary in their daily lives, though they will often share space with other bulls in their wanderings and are known to come to the aid of other oliphants in distress. With cows standing around 5 feet tall and weighing as much as 2 tons, while males stand 7 feet, or over 2 meters at the shoulder, and weighing as much as 5 tons, they weigh nearly as much as a small earth elephant, although are much longer, leaner, and a lot shorter. This build is quite well suited for the dense forests in which they call home. The reason they stay in dense forests is quite simple. In the open forests and prairies of Arvel and Nikar, great theropods are the top predator. In direct confrontation, large proboscidians often have an advantage. They lack the endurance and quick reflexes of megaraptorans, but are often heavier and stronger. However, their great weakness is in long pregnancies and childhood. A calf might only be born every 3 to 5 years, and while bulls might fend off megaraptorans, their young are quite vulnerable. With the exception of grassland oliphants, the proboscidians who survived in Kaimere for most of its history did so by hiding in closed forests. Compared to those of elephants, the tusks of oliphant are quite dense. Although their tusks are useful in both predator defense and manipulating vegetation, they are best kept short due to living in dense forests. While sparring, bulls will often use upper tusks to engage and then jab with the shorter but much sharper lower tusks. This can also be brought to bear against predators. In their denser forest habitat, robust megaraptorans are rare, yet terror birds like the fireback can bring down all but a healthy bull in his prime, so a reliable defense against frontal assault can be quite beneficial. Being smaller than elephants, they are more agile and able to keep their flanks low if attacked from behind. Though a downside of living in forests too dense for megaraptorans is that turning about can be a time-consuming process, and facing a pair of terror birds in a tight space can be their undoing. Common oliphants were once common in closed forests throughout the Crescent Sea, but overhunting for their ivory during the reign of the First Semitic Empire resulted in great scarcity, and it was believed that they were only found in the forests of the inland sea. As their ranges no longer encompassed the national territories, many consider them to be only present in the wildlands of the known world, and arguably not in the known world proper. Either by migration or recovery from reclusive populations, oliphants are now found in the crescent jungles and Soritic wetlands again, although they are still endangered in this range. Like living elephants, oliphant bulls go through a hormonal spike called must, signaled by inflamed and leaking glands on the temple. During this period of time, they are incredibly aggressive and violent. In healthy populations, dominant bulls not only have more of a muted must, their presence also minimizes the effects in the spike in young bulls, thereby keeping the peace. Unfortunately, large bulls are favored targets of ivory hunters for their larger tusks, so areas with heavily hunted populations often see much greater trends of violence by smaller, stealthier, and more aggressive males. In the closed forests of Arvel and Nikar beyond the Crescent, they are still highly successful and among the most abundant megafauna of closed forests. Although some consider Arvelith oliphants to be a distinct species due to having more fur, especially in the Highlands, this appears to be a regional distinction of population in response to cooler average temperatures. Oliphants in their southern range are also larger and considered to be less aggressive. Nikari oliphants are known to charge and gore travelers without provocation. While Arvelith oliphants are still quite dangerous, especially in the Highlands, they have a fairly calm disposition, though bulls will still charge anything then flee when faced with anything short of an adult centaur or large herbivores. Although they are still hunted for their ivory and meat, they are well documented to charge, restrain with tusk and trunk, then eviscerate any who pose a threat, especially in the presence of young. Big game hunters regard oliphants as among the most impressive of targets, but this reputation is quite well founded as many hunters have been crippled or slain in the attempt. On the northern side of Arvel's mountain range, oliphants are the only common proboscidian. This side of the mountain is packed with lush forest and abundant fresh water to support not only megafauna like oliphants, but also the great megaraptorans with prey on any who dare venture into open territory. In this context, giant proboscidians have never lasted long. A different story unfolds in the temperate highlands of the dry southern side of the mountains. Here, a vast prairie with scattered forests supports two of the last giant proboscidians, the Kaimeran woolly elephant, also called the Drenduga or steppe oliphant, despite only having 2 tusks, and the steppe mammoth or bosuga, by far the most abundant large animal in this habitat. Although both are quite successful, neither is common near heavily settled areas of the known world. Each will be getting their focal episode later this month, so I'll leave them aside for now. The common oliphant, Drenduga, and mammoth aren't common in territories of the great nations. The proboscidians with the most frequent encounter by Kaimerans are, despite their reputation of elephants and Earth as giants, common Kaimeran elephants are all quite small. Many times in Earth's history, mammoths, elephants, and other proboscidians swam out to an island when sea levels were low, got trapped, and shrank in a common phenomenon called Insular dwarfism. This most famously happened in the Mediterranean, on islands west of California, and on Wrangel Island north of Siberia, where the last mammoths lived. Proboscidians have an astonishing sense of smell, so smelling lush and untouched vegetation on an island many miles offshore is not surprising and would have been a tempting lure. Foster's rule states that in an isolated environment, animals can quickly adopt larger or smaller body size based on space, predator pressures, and food availability. Although the inland sea has thousands of islands scattered throughout, and common oliphants regularly travel between them to forage, oliphants in these islands generally do not shrink. While each island has limited space, there are so many islands, and the waters are shallow enough that oliphant can simply move to the next island, and keep browsing rather than become trapped and isolated. To make matters worse, there are plenty of large island-hopping predators, so any local fauna that shrinks just renders itself vulnerable. However, on the offshore Kaleen Islands to the south, several different proboscidians have been found in insular populations. For most of recorded history, all of these Kaleen dwarf elephants were assumed to be the same animal, called the Tuga in the language of the Eskadine or Eastern Kaleen. However, assembly studies of the whole archipelago have revealed as many as 22 insular dwarf species from many different genera of voyaging proboscidians. The trunked boar, or Tuga, namesake of these little giants, are a species of Paleoloxodon. Paleoloxodon were generalist browsers and grazers, and it seems wherever these generalists went, they could adapt to whatever food was readily available and outcompete whatever small herbivores were present. They were most abundant on the largest of the Kaleen Islands, Kaimerans Island, where bulls can weigh up to a ton, although most species of Tuga scattered throughout the many smaller eastern Kaleen Islands are even smaller. Some islands, particularly distant and only accessible during unusually low sea levels, have a distinct species with tiny populations, while the Kaimeran species often integrate with nearby islands, which boosts their genetic viability. Like most proboscidians, bulls of all Paleodoxodon tuga are generally solitary, while cows and calves live in small herds. As generalist browsers and grazers, they can get by on just about anything on these islands. Folklore, historical accounts, and an abundance of ivory in circulation proves that once a large species at the core islands of the Free States was present, although if any survive, it is in isid populations in the Highlands, where fewer people call home. On one of the smaller and more isolated islands, tuga are the only herbivores, and there are no regular predators large enough to bring down even these small species. These smaller species run into problems of genetic diversity, as many species have less than 1,000 individuals, but without regular predators or competition, they do enjoy a more peaceful existence. On Kaimeran and other larger islands, cervids are the greatest competition of tuga, with 3 species of cervivitis being the primary opponents for grazing and browsing opportunities. Although eagles, pterosaurs, and firebirds sometimes hunt their young, wolves are the most frequent threat to Kaimeran tuga. Kaleen wolves can reach 200 pounds and are large enough to tackle even bull Kaimeran tuga if they hunt in groups. Lions and homotherium are also found on a few islands, although the Kaleen have hunted most of these big cats to extinction, which is a boon to tuga populations. Black sloths sometimes swim out to these isolated islands, and boar sloths can readily kill even the largest Kaimeran tuga. Titan crows are the only regular threat to all islands, though forests can provide sanctuary. On Kaimeran Island, tuga are fairly skittish and aggressive due to predator pressures. They have been domesticated efforts on this population, though thus far they have not been successful because of their temperament. Tiny island species of tuga are much more docile, although they still take too long to reach maturity to be a viable domesticate, not becoming adults until around 15 years of age, and being isolated, many are riddled with health issues. They are, however, very easy to tame, and take well to training because of their intelligence, so make popular pets in Kaleen settlements. As one travels along this great archipelago, it becomes evident that with each new wave of large mainland proboscidian, outclass their dwarf cousins and push them further down the island chain. Periodically more accessible further back in time with drops in sea level. In both north and south of Kaimeran, tuga descended from earlier mammoth migrations are quite abundant where there is a lot of grassland. On these dry islands, the grass-specialized teeth of these little mammoths help them make ends meet and appear to have helped them stave off Paleoloxodont competition. There are a few trees here, so they have more to fear from Titan crows, but without other large mammals present, they face no grazing competition. These mammoths generally live a peaceful life, and with a population in the thousands between the many islands, there is no present concern for their survival. Further west, a tiny species of tuga descended from an unknown stegodont has been recently verified from a single large island, creatively called Stegodon Island by assembly naturalists. Very few Kaleen call this home. This forested island is a protected sanctuary, though a tiny population of around 3,000 individuals means the assembly has kept interaction to a minimum out of fear of possible zoonotic transmission. 3,000 is considered on the low end of a healthy population, so while still viable, they are still quite vulnerable. Surrounding islands appear to once have had other stegodont tuga, but were hunted to extinction by seafaring Kaimerans. It is unknown why this island was spared, but the assembly has worked with Kaleen to minimize contact. As the Kaleen generally only see land as a place to get wood and settle down after a voyage, they are much more receptive to conservation efforts than the lands of other peoples of Kaimere. But an island with docile and largely defenseless creatures is an appealing target for seafarers, so although the situation is under control, fears of ivory and meat harvested does mean their future could be in jeopardy. On a large island to the southwest, near the edge of the archipelago, the reclusive Tokatan people call home. This landmass and its surrounding islands are home to a beast called Cleaver tusks by Escadine voyagers. The Cleaver tusk is an amebelodont, last of the shovel tuskers once common in Kaimere's forests. Rumor has it they have a repulsive scent and are quite aggressive. Little is known about this island because its inhabitants have made it clear that they do not trust assembly agents, but from translated conversations, it appears Cleaver tusks use their lower jaw to slice branches before consumption, rather than as a shovel for digging or ladle to scoop up water plants as it was once theorized. Both of these utilities may be used from time to time, just not as the primary function. Allegedly, bulls will defend their families by grabbing a hunter with their tusks or upper trunk, then eviscerate with the lower blades, but this is unsubstantiated. On a massive island to the northeast, called Blackfish Island by Escadine sailors, dense temperate rainforests cover the southern half of the island, which fades to an open steppe to the north. This island is the dominion of the poorly understood Suhenjin people. Like most Kaleen, they are seafarers who have minimal interest in the island interior, so although their villages surround the coast, most of the island, which is roughly the size of the Kaljareth Peninsula, is wilderness. The grizzleback oliphant is among the largest and most formidable of beasts, notorious for slaughtering any who dare approach. A skull and gold-back pelt examined by assembly naturalists confirm that they are late surviving species of mastodon, likely descended from animals harvested in the Miocene. The Escadines say that they are carnivorous and hunted the other Tuga species on Blackfish Island to extinction, but this is exaggeration and conflating them with rumors of cannibalism by the indigenous Suhenjin, who call this and the surrounding islands home. In truth, grizzleback oliphant are likely similar in diet to their ancestors, being specialized browsers. None have been seen alive by assembly naturalists due to the hostility of its indigenous people, but their population is presumed to be stable. Little is known about the fauna of this island, so it is not known if they have any natural predators. As the northern half of Blackfish Island is a Mediterranean climate, which is not particularly hospitable to mastodon, it is presumed that there may be another species of proboscidian to the north, although unsurprisingly, considering their hostility toward outsiders, so far none have been found. If efforts by the Assembly to establish contact with the Suhenjin of this island come to fruition, study of this elusive relic may someday be possible. To the far north, far beyond the known world in a classified location, another proboscidian has become a miniature version of their mainland cousins. They were only recently discovered by the Assembly. Although accounted for in the folklore of the Free States, only the Kentarine interacted with them prior to discovery, and out of respect for prior treaty agreements of secrecy, the Assembly only interacts with them through Kentarine proxies. These are the Korikoim, or Chuga in the common tongue, and manifant as the Assembly calls them. While all proboscidians are considered sentient by the Assembly, the manifant are especially well known for high intelligence, having sophisticated tool use, dynamic culture, complex social hierarchy, agriculture, and even seafaring capabilities. As the manifant is the topic of the last episode in this miniseries, I'll pause here. Again, cheers to Ian for sponsoring this series. It's been such a great opportunity to explore some of my favorite animals, and a real treat. The next 2 weeks we will learn about the two giants of the Arvellus steppes, the mammoth and the Drenduga. Following that we will explore the great dinotheres of Kyrule. Hope you've all enjoyed, and I'll see you next week. Cheers, folks!